My wife said, "Seriously? You're mad I forgot your birthday?" After standing me up for the third time. I said, "Not mad, just reminded." Then I made sure she'd never forget another date again, when she saw my calendar update. So there I was, 33 years old, and sitting at Giorgio's like some tragic character from a rom-com nobody wanted to watch. You know the type. The guy who orders wine for two and pretends his life isn't falling apart while the waiter gives him those pitying looks that make you want to crawl under the table and die. Happy freaking birthday to me, right? I'd made the reservation 3 weeks ago because that's what responsible husbands do. We plan ahead. We make sure the good Italian place downtown has a table available on Friday night because our wives allegedly enjoy romantic dinners with cloth napkins and overpriced pasta. Maya had even seemed excited when I mentioned it, doing that thing where she bounces on her toes and says, "Ooh, fancy," like she's genuinely thrilled to spend an evening with the man she married. What a joke that turned out to be. The hostess, some perky 20-something with perfectly winged eyeliner, had seated me at our usual corner table. You know, the one with the flickering candle and the view of the street where couples walk by holding hands like they're auditioning for a greeting card commercial. Real romantic stuff, if you're into that sort of torture. I'd ordered the Chianti because Maya loves red wine, especially when someone else is paying for it, and told the waiter she was running a few minutes late. Classic mistake number one. Believing my own lie. By 7:15, I was checking my phone every 30 seconds like some desperate teenager waiting for a text back from their crush. Maya's last message had been at 6:30. "Getting ready now? Can't wait," face blowing a kiss, followed by radio silence. Not even one of those little typing bubbles that would have given me false hope that an explanation was coming. The waiter, Tony, according to his name tag, kept circling back with that professional smile that screamed, "This is awkward for both of us." He'd refill my water glass, ask if I wanted to order appetizers, suggest maybe she'd prefer the salmon special tonight. Poor guy was working harder to keep my marriage together than my actual wife was. "She'll be here any minute," I kept telling him, because apparently I'm a glutton for public humiliation. "Traffic's probably crazy. You know how Friday nights are." Tony would nod sympathetically and retreat to whatever corner waiters hide in when they're discussing the sad solo diners who can't face reality. By 7:45, I'd moved from denial to bargaining. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she got stuck at work. She's always getting urgent calls from her marketing agency that somehow only happened during our plans. Maybe there was some kind of family emergency and she couldn't reach me. My brain was working overtime to manufacture excuses that my gut knew were complete bullshit. 8 o'clock rolled around like a freight train, and that's when the real fun started. Other couples were getting seated around me. Anniversary dinners, first dates, groups of friends celebrating someone's promotion or engagement. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there nursing my second glass of wine like some kind of relationship casualty, watching everyone else live the life I thought I had. The couple at the table next to me was particularly brutal to witness. The guy kept taking pictures of his girlfriend laughing at his jokes, and she was actually paying attention when he talked. Imagine that. They shared their appetizer, clinked glasses, looked at each other like they actually enjoyed being in the same room. It was like watching an alien species that had figured out how to make relationships work. At 8:10, reality came knocking. Maya wasn't coming. She wasn't stuck in traffic or dealing with a work crisis or helping her mother move furniture. She was somewhere else, doing something else, with someone else, because literally anything was more important than showing up for her husband's birthday dinner. This wasn't exactly breaking news, if I'm being honest with myself. Our last anniversary dinner? She'd bailed for some emergency girls' night that turned out to be karaoke and too many Cosmos. The concert tickets I'd bought for her favorite band? Oh, I forgot to put it in my calendar, while she posted Instagram stories from some rooftop bar across town. Valentine's Day 2 years running, my promotion celebration, her own birthday party that I threw for her. There was always something more pressing than actually being present. But sitting there in Giorgio's, watching the candle wax drip onto the white tablecloth while couples around me celebrated being happy together, something finally clicked into place. Not anger, weirdly enough. I'd been angry plenty of times before, and anger meant I still cared enough to fight about it. This was different. This was exhaustion settling into my bones like I'd been carrying something heavy for miles and finally realized I could just put it down. Tony appeared again around 8:20 with that same professional sympathy. "Would you like to order something for yourself, sir?" The kitchen's still open. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a guy who'd probably witnessed this exact scene 100 times before. Husbands waiting for wives who weren't coming. Wives waiting for boyfriends who'd forgotten. People convinced that if they just waited long enough, their person would remember they mattered. Actually, I think I'm good, I said, reaching for my wallet. Could I get the check for the wine? Of course, sir. And happy birthday. He said it quietly, like he didn't want to draw attention to the fact that I was spending my birthday getting stood up by my own wife. I tipped him $40 on a $30 bottle of wine because what else was I going to do with the money I'd budgeted for Maya's dinner? Plus, Tony had been a good sport about the whole pathetic situation. In service industry, people deserve hazard pay for dealing with people's relationship disasters. Walking out of Giorgio's, I passed the hostess station where perky eyeliner girl gave me a concerned smile. Have a good evening, she chirped, probably wondering if I was going to come back next week with the same story about my perpetually late wife. The funny thing about rock bottom is how quiet it is. You expect some big dramatic moment, screaming, crying, throwing things, demanding explanations. Instead, I just walked to my car in the cool October air, got in, and sat there for a minute. Not angry, not hurt, just tired. Bone deep, soul-crushing tired of being the person Maya forgot about. The husband who always understood. The guy who made reservations for two and ate dinner alone. Tomorrow, she'd show up with coffee and pastries and some perfectly reasonable explanation about why she'd missed my birthday dinner. She'd smile that sheepish smile and brush her hair behind her ear, and I'd forgive her because that's what we did. That's what we'd always done. But sitting in that parking spot outside Giorgio's, watching other couples walk by holding hands and laughing about shared jokes, I realized something had shifted. Maybe it was finally time to stop making reservations for someone who never planned to show up. The knock came at 9:30 in the morning, which was honestly impressive timing for Maya considering she usually treated anything before 11 a.m. like it was some kind of human rights violation. I was sitting at my kitchen table, nursing my second cup of coffee and scrolling through work emails like a functioning adult, when I heard her signature tap 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 on the door. Not the doorbell, mind you. That would have required her to remember which button to push. Just that specific little knock that said, "I'm here with damage control, and I really hope you're not too pissed off." I didn't rush to answer it. Let her stand out there for a minute and think about what she'd done, right? Maybe count to 10 and consider how it feels to wait for someone who might not show up. But then again, this was Maya we're talking about, and self-reflection wasn't exactly her strongest skill set. When I finally opened the door, there she was in all her apologetic glory. Hair pulled back in one of those messy buns that somehow looked perfectly calculated, wearing my favorite sundress, the blue one that made her eyes pop, and carrying a paper bag from Sunrise Bakery along with 2 cups of what I already knew was my usual order. Oat milk latte, extra shot, light foam. She'd memorized my coffee order, but couldn't remember my birthday dinner. The irony was so thick you could have served it with the pastries. "Morning, sunshine," she said with that smile. You know the one. Equal parts sheepish and charming, like a kid who got caught sneaking cookies before dinner, but knows they're too cute to stay in trouble for long. I brought peace offerings. Peace offerings. Not apologies, not explanations, not "holy shit, I can't believe I missed your birthday dinner." Peace offerings, like we were 2 countries negotiating a treaty instead of a married couple where one person had completely blown off the other on his birthday. Maya. I stepped back to let her in, because what else was I going to do? Stand there and have this conversation in the hallway, where Mrs. Chun next door could hear every word and add it to her growing collection of evidence that the young couple in 4B was heading for divorce court? She bustled into the kitchen like she owned the place, which technically she did since both our names were on the lease, but still, there's something about the way guilty people move, all efficient energy and forced cheerfulness, like if they just act normal enough. Maybe the whole situation will magically become normal too. "I got you those almond croissants you love," she announced, unpacking the bakery bag with theatrical enthusiasm. "And some of those little lemon scones, and, oh, they had those chocolate things with the raspberry filling that you got obsessed with last month." Obsessed? Right. Because developing a mild preference for a pastry was the same as being obsessed, but completely forgetting your husband's existence was just an honest mistake that could happen to anyone. I took the coffee she offered because I'm not a complete masochist, and the caffeine withdrawal headache was already starting to kick in. The first sip was perfect, of course. She might not remember important dates, but the woman had never screwed up a coffee order in her life. Priorities, people. We all have them. So, she said, settling into the chair across from me like we were about to have a pleasant Saturday morning chat about weekend plans. I am so sorry about last night, Liam. You have no idea. Actually, I had several ideas, but I let her continue with what I was already recognizing as Maya's greatest hits, Volume 12. Clara threw this surprise party for Jessica. You remember Jessica, right? From my old job? The one who got divorced last year and has been super depressed. She was talking with her hands now, painting this elaborate picture of friendship, loyalty, and unavoidable social obligations. Anyway, Clara had been planning it for weeks, and Jessica had no idea, and right when I was getting ready to leave for dinner, Clara called me absolutely panicking because the caterer had screwed up the order and she needed help picking up food, and I held up my hand. Maya, and you know how Jessica gets when she's emotional. So I couldn't just abandon her on the night when all her friends were trying to cheer her up, and I kept checking my phone to text you, but then, Maya. She stopped mid-gesture, one hand frozen in the air like she was conducting an invisible orchestra. Those blue eyes went wide with that look she got when she realized her carefully crafted explanation wasn't having the desired effect. I texted you, I said calmly. At 8:15. Asked if you were okay, if something had happened. You read it. I saw the little red notification pop up. The color drained from her face just a little bit. Busted. I was going to text you back, but then Marcus showed up, Jessica's ex, and there was this whole drama, and Clara was crying, and I had to help Jessica get him to leave. You posted on Instagram. I continued, pulling out my phone. At 9:47 p.m., a video of you and the girls doing karaoke to I Will Survive. Great song choice, by the way. Really captured the mood. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish trying to breathe air. Liam, you tagged the location. Barney's Pub. The same Barney's that's 3 blocks from Giorgio's, where I sat waiting for you until 8:20. Now she was doing the hair thing, brushing it behind her ear with that nervous little gesture that used to be endearing, but now just felt like a tick. Like her body's automatic response to getting caught in a lie. It wasn't like that, she said quietly. I wasn't trying to. I mean, I didn't plan for it to happen that way. But it did happen that way. I took another sip of the perfect coffee and studied her face. Again, that hit home. I could see it in the way her shoulders sagged just a fraction, the way her perfectly applied lipstick seemed to lose some of its confidence. I know I've been scattered lately, she admitted. But this was different. This was an emergency. Jessica's surprise party was an emergency. Yes, she's been so depressed since the divorce, and more of an emergency than your husband's birthday. Silence. The kind of silence that fills up a room like toxic gas, making everything feel heavy and hard to breathe. Maya stared down at her hands, probably trying to figure out which combination of words would make this whole conversation go away so we could get back to our regularly scheduled programming of her doing whatever she wanted while I pretended it was fine. But something was different this morning. Something had shifted last night while I was sitting alone at that table, watching other couples celebrate actually being together. I wasn't angry. Anger was too energetic, too engaged. I was something else entirely. I was done. Not done with the marriage, necessarily, but done with this version of it. Done pretending that being married to Maya meant accepting that I would always come second to whatever shiny distraction caught her attention. Done with the apology tours and the peace offerings and the elaborate explanations that somehow never included the words, I was wrong, or I'll do better. I forgive you, I said, because that's what I always said. That's what had kept our marriage functioning for 3 years. My endless capacity to understand and forgive and make excuses for why my wife kept forgetting I existed. Her face lit up like Christmas morning. Crisis averted, husband managed, normal life could resume. But as I watched her relax back into her chair and reach for one of those almond croissants, chattering about how we should plan something special for next weekend to make up for last night, I realized something important. Forgiveness and acceptance weren't the same thing. I could forgive her for missing my birthday. I could even understand how it happened. Maya's brain worked like a pinball machine, bouncing from one urgent situation to the next without much regard for previously scheduled programming. But I didn't have to accept that this was just how things were going to be forever. The moment came on Thursday afternoon while I was trying to focus on quarterly reports and Maya was doing that thing where she talks at me while I'm clearly working. You know the routine. She'd perch on the edge of my desk chair, scrolling through her phone and providing a running commentary on everyone else's life like I was some kind of captive audience who'd signed up for the Maya show. "Oh my God, you'll never guess what happened to Brittany," she was saying, waving her phone around like visual evidence would make her story more compelling. "So apparently Derek, you remember Derek, right? The one with the stupid beard who always orders craft beer like he's some kind of connoisseur. Anyway, Derek decided he wants to have this whole big thing for his birthday, and Brittany's been planning it for weeks, and now he's saying he might want to do something different, and she's totally freaking out because I kept typing, hoping she'd get the hint that I was actually trying to accomplish something productive. But Maya and hints went together about, as well as Maya and remembering important dates. So she calls me yesterday crying about how men never know what they want. Which, hello, tell me something I don't know, right? And I told her she should just plan what she wants, and if Derek doesn't like it, that's his problem because... Maya, I said without looking up from my laptop. "I'm working. I know, babe, but listen to this part. So Brittany decides to throw the party anyway, right? And she's doing it this Friday night at that new rooftop place downtown. And I told her I'd absolutely be there because she needs the moral support. And there it was. Friday night. The magic words that made my fingers stop moving on the keyboard. "This Friday?" I asked, still staring at my screen, but no longer seeing the numbers. "Yeah, this Friday. It's going to be so fun. Brittany's been so stressed about everything with Derek, and I think a good girl's night is exactly what she needs to." Maya. She finally stopped talking, probably picking up on something in my voice that suggested this conversation was about to take a turn she wasn't expecting. "We have date night on Fridays," I said, finally turning to look at her. She was sitting there in my old college t-shirt and yoga pants, hair in a messy bun, phone still clutched in her hand like a security blanket. "Every Friday. For 3 years. Oh, right. She did that thing where she smacks her forehead like she's in a sitcom. But this is different, babe. Brittany really needs me right now, and it's just one Friday, and we can totally do date night on Saturday instead, or..." I held up my hand to stop her mid-rationalization, and something about the gesture must have registered because she actually shut up for once. "Let's cancel date nights," I said calmly. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire neither of us had meant to start. Maya blinked at me like I'd just announced I was taking up professional alligator wrestling. "What do you mean, cancel date nights?" "I mean cancel them. No more Friday dinners. No more birthday reservations. No more anniversary celebrations. No more standing dates of any kind." I was surprised by how rational I sounded, how reasonable. Like I was suggesting we switch cable providers instead of dismantling the basic structure of our marriage. "Liam, that's crazy. Why would we do that?" "Because you keep forgetting them." She laughed. Actually laughed, like I'd made some kind of joke that she was generously pretending to find funny. "I don't keep forgetting them. Sometimes things come up, but..." "Maya," I turned my chair to face her fully, giving her my complete attention for probably the first time in months. "When's the last time you showed up to something we planned? And I mean actually showed up, on time, without having to reschedule or leave early or invite other people along." She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. Opened it again. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to come up with a recent example of her actually prioritizing our plans. "That's not fair," she said finally. "You're making it sound like I never spend time with you. I'm making it sound like you never prioritize spending time with me. There's a difference. But I do. We live together. We see each other every day. Seeing me when you get home at 10 p.m. and I'm already in bed doesn't count as quality time, Maya. Neither does talking at me while I'm trying to work or while you're scrolling through Instagram." She was getting that look now, the one she got when she realized the conversation wasn't going the way she'd expected and she needed to shift tactics. Less charming confusion, more defensive indignation. "So what, you're punishing me? You're going to cancel all our plans because I missed your birthday dinner?" "I'm not punishing you. I'm accepting reality." I leaned back in my chair, surprised by how calm I felt. "You don't prioritize our plans, so let's stop making them. Problem solved. That doesn't solve anything. That's just giving up." "No, Maya. Giving up would be continuing to make reservations that you won't show up for and pretending that's normal. This is adapting." She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back like movement would help her process what was happening. This is so stupid, Liam. One missed dinner, and you want to blow up our entire relationship. One missed dinner? I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my calendar. Let's see. There was the birthday dinner, obviously. Before that, the anniversary dinner you bailed on for Chloe's engagement party. The concert I bought tickets for that you forgot about because Amanda was having a crisis. The weekend trip to Napa that got postponed indefinitely because your sister needed help moving. Should I keep going? Her face was flushing now, that telltale pink that meant she was getting genuinely upset instead of just performatively dramatic. Those were all emergencies, Liam. I can't control when my friends need me. But you can control when I need you, apparently. That stopped her cold. She stared at me like I'd slapped her, and for a second I almost felt bad. Almost. That's not what I meant, she said quietly. But it's what you do. I turned back to my laptop and started closing windows, methodically shutting down my work for the day. Your friends have emergencies that require your immediate attention. Your family has crises that only you can solve. Your coworkers have urgent projects that need your weekend time. But me? I get penciled in around the margins, and when something more interesting comes up, I get erased. That's not true. I opened my calendar app and turned the screen toward her. This is our Google Calendar, Maya. The one we share. Look at next Friday. She leaned forward reluctantly, squinting at the screen. What does it say? Date night, she read quietly. 7 p.m. And the Friday before that. Date night. 7 p.m. And before that. She was getting it now. I could see the realization creeping across her face as she scrolled backward through weeks and weeks of date night, 7 p.m. entries, most of them with little notes I'd added after the fact. Maya, Jessica's, or rescheduled. Maya's work event, or canceled. Maya forgot. I never realized. She started, then trailed off. That's the problem right there. You never realize because it doesn't matter to you enough to remember. I stood up and walked over to where she was still staring at my phone. So let's make it easy. No more standing dates means no more disappointment when you don't show up. But what about us? What about our relationship? What about it? You'll do what you've always done. Hang out with your friends, help with their emergencies, live your life. And I'll do what I should have been doing all along. Stop waiting around for you to remember I exist. I reached over and started deleting the recurring date night entries from our shared calendar. One by one, those little Friday night blocks disappeared, leaving clean white space where our relationship used to live. Liam, stop. Please. But I kept deleting. Past dates, future dates, all of them gone. In their place, I created a new recurring event. Personal time. Unavailable. There, I said, handing her back the phone. Problem solved. No more forgotten reservations. No more wasted money. No more sitting alone wondering if my wife is ever going to show up. I'm officially unavailable on Friday nights. Maya stared at the screen like it contained the secrets of the universe instead of just a simple calendar entry. What are you going to do instead? I shrugged. I don't know yet. Maybe I'll take that cooking class I've been thinking about. Maybe I'll learn guitar. Maybe I'll just sit in a bar somewhere and have conversations with people who actually want to be there. For the first time since I'd known her, Maya was completely speechless. The cooking class idea hit me at 2:30 in the morning on Tuesday while I was lying awake listening to Maya breathe next to me and wondering when my life had become so damn predictable. Not good predictable, like knowing your favorite coffee shop will have your order ready when you walk in. More like sad predictable, like knowing your wife would rather be literally anywhere else than spending time with you. I'd been thinking about it ever since I deleted those Friday night calendar entries. What was I actually going to do with all this newfound freedom? Sit at home feeling sorry for myself? Go to bars and pretend to be single while still wearing my wedding ring? Take up CrossFit and become one of those guys who only talks about their macros and their deadlift PR? Then I remembered something my buddy Jonas had mentioned a few months back about this cooking studio downtown. Dude, you should totally take a class, he'd said after I complained about our dinner options for the third time that week. Marco's place is supposed to be incredible. Plus, chicks dig guys who can cook. At the time, I'd laughed it off because I was married to someone who supposedly already dug me, and also because the idea of spending my Friday nights learning to julienne vegetables instead of trying to salvage my relationship seemed like giving up. But lying there at 2:30 a.m., Listening to my wife sleep peacefully after spending the entire evening texting her friends about weekend plans that definitely didn't include me, it suddenly seemed like the best idea I'd ever had. By Thursday morning, I'd done my research. Marco's Culinary Studio offered a 12-week Fundamentals of Italian Cooking course that met every Friday from 7 to 9:30. Perfect timing, really, right when Maya and I would normally be sitting across from each other at some restaurant, making small talk while she checked her phone every 5 minutes to see what she was missing. The website looked legit. Professional photos of people in aprons laughing while they stirred sauce and kneaded dough like they were having the time of their lives. Testimonials from former students raving about Marco's patience and expertise and how much their confidence in the kitchen had improved. There was even a picture of the instructor himself, a stocky Italian guy with graying hair and one of those genuine smiles that made you think he actually enjoyed teaching people to cook instead of just collecting their money. The best part? The class was already half full, which meant I wouldn't be the only sad husband trying to figure out what to do with his newly liberated Friday nights. Maybe there would be other people there for normal reasons, like wanting to impress someone or learn a useful life skill, or just expand their horizons beyond takeout Chinese and frozen pizza. I signed up online during my lunch break, using my personal credit card instead of our joint account, because this felt like something I needed to do for myself, by myself. 12 weeks, $600, every Friday night from October through December. When I got the confirmation email, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: excitement about my own life. Maya didn't notice the charge when it showed up on my statement because Maya didn't pay attention to our finances unless her own card got declined at Target. She was too busy planning girls' nights and brunches and whatever other social events filled up her calendar like some kind of popularity contest she was determined to win. Friday afternoon rolled around, and I found myself actually looking forward to the evening instead of dreading another awkward dinner where we'd run out of things to talk about after 20 minutes. I left work at 5:30 sharp, went home to change into jeans and a t-shirt that wouldn't be ruined by tomato sauce, and grabbed the notebook I'd bought specifically for recipe notes. Maya was in the living room, getting ready for what appeared to be another night out with the girls. She was doing that thing where she tried on 3 different outfits while talking on speakerphone with someone, probably Brittany or Jessica or whoever needed emotional support this week. "You're leaving early tonight," she called out as I passed by the doorway. Hot date. It was supposed to be a joke, but there was something in her voice that made me turn around. She was standing in front of our full-length mirror, holding up 2 different tops and waiting for whoever was on the phone to weigh in on her fashion choices. "Something like that," I said. "Oh my God, yes, the blue one totally makes your eyes pop," the voice on her phone was saying. "We're the blue one and those jeans that make your but look amazing." Maya laughed and tossed the rejected shirt onto our bed, which was already covered with the casualties of her decision-making process. "Liam's being all mysterious about where he's going tonight. Maybe he's finally got himself a side piece," the voice said, and they both dissolved into giggles like this was the funniest thing anyone had ever said. "Very funny," I said, but I wasn't really annoyed. If anything, I was kind of impressed by how little curiosity Maya showed about my actual plans. 3 years of marriage, and she knew me so well that the possibility of me doing something unexpected didn't even register as worth investigating. "Have fun doing whatever mysterious thing you're doing," she said, blowing me a kiss before turning back to her mirror and her phone conversation about whether she should wear the gold earrings or the silver ones. Marco's studio was exactly what I'd hoped for: a converted warehouse space with industrial lighting, stainless steel prep stations, and the kind of professional kitchen setup that made you feel like you might actually know what you were doing. There were 12 students total, ranging from college kids to retirees, and Marco turned out to be exactly as advertised: enthusiastic without being obnoxious, patient with beginners, and genuinely passionate about teaching people to cook. "Welcome, welcome," he boomed as we filed in, his accent thick enough to cut with one of the knives we'd presumably learned to use properly. "Tonight, we start with the basics. How to hold a knife without cutting off your fingers, how to make a proper soffritto, how to cook pasta so it doesn't turn to mush. Simple things, but important things." I found myself at a station next to a woman about my age who introduced herself as Sarah and explained that she'd signed up because she was tired of living on delivery food and frozen dinners. On my other side was Dave, a guy in his 50s who'd apparently promised his wife he'd learn to cook something other than scrambled eggs. What about you? Sarah asked as we tied our aprons and arranged our ingredients. Career change? Midlife crisis? Trying to impress someone? I thought about it for a second. Trying to impress myself, I guess. She nodded like that made perfect sense, and we got to work. The thing about cooking, I discovered, is that it requires your complete attention. You can't chop onions while checking your phone or worry about your marriage while you're trying to get the timing right on 3 different dishes. For 2.5 hours, I was completely present in my own life, focused on learning something new and useful instead of analyzing why my wife preferred everyone else's company to mine. Marco walked us through knife skills, explaining how to hold the blade properly, how to create a rocking motion that would keep our fingertips attached to our hands. He showed us how to build flavors from the ground up, starting with that holy trinity of onion, carrot, and celery that forms the base of so many Italian dishes. Cooking is about patience, he said as we stirred our various pots and pans. You cannot rush good food. You cannot skip steps and expect the same result. You must trust the process, even when it seems like nothing is happening. I was pretty sure he was talking about risotto, but it felt like life advice. By 9:30, I'd successfully made my first batch of homemade pasta, a simple marinara sauce that actually tasted like something you'd order in a restaurant, and a basic risotto that hadn't turned into glue. More importantly, I'd spent an entire evening doing something for myself, learning a skill that had nothing to do with making Maya happy or fixing our relationship or managing anyone else's emotional needs. Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, pride in my own accomplishment. It was a small thing, maybe, but it was mine. My phone had 3 texts from Maya. Where are you? At 8:15. Are you really cooking instead of seeing me? At 8:47. And this is so childish at 9:23. I didn't respond until I got home and found her waiting up for me, arms crossed, and wearing that expression that meant we were about to have a talk. So she said, cooking class. Yep. This is what you're doing instead of spending time with your wife. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that for the first time in weeks, I wasn't apologizing for existing. This is what I'm doing instead of waiting for my wife to remember I exist. For once, Maya didn't have a comeback. Maya's campaign to reclaim control of my Friday nights started exactly 48 hours after my first cooking class, and honestly, I had to admire her dedication to the cause. She approached it like a military operation, complete with strategic planning, tactical maneuvers, and what appeared to be a comprehensive PR strategy designed to make me look like the unreasonable one. It began with the guilt trip phase. Sunday morning, she made pancakes, actual pancakes, from scratch, not the frozen kind she usually threw in the toaster while checking Instagram. She even arranged them in a little heart shape on the plate, which would have been sweet if it hadn't been so obviously calculated. I was thinking, she said, settling across from me with her own stack and that smile that used to make me forget whatever I was annoyed about. Maybe I could join your cooking class. It could be our thing, you know? Like couples therapy, but with food. I almost choked on my orange juice. You want to join my cooking class? Why not? It sounds fun, and we'd be spending time together, which is what you wanted, right? Maya, you hate cooking. Last week you burned water trying to make ramen. That was an accident. And people can change, Liam. People can learn new things. She was using her reasonable voice now, the one she deployed when she wanted to sound mature and compromising instead of like someone who was panicking because her husband had discovered he could have fun without her. The class is full. I lied, because the thought of Maya taking over my one sacred space made my eye twitch. Well, maybe next session then. Or we could find a different class we could take together. Or you could find your own class, and we could each have our own thing. Her face fell exactly the way it was supposed to, and I felt that familiar tug of guilt that had kept me apologizing for 3 years of her bad behavior. But then I remembered sitting alone at Giorgio's while she was out living her best life, and the guilt evaporated like steam off hot pasta. When the guilt trip didn't work, she moved on to phase 2, social media surveillance. Suddenly, Maya was very interested in my whereabouts on Friday nights. Not in person, mind you. She was usually out with friends or at some event I hadn't been invited to, but she was definitely tracking my digital footprint like some kind of relationship detective. I saw you checked in at Marco's place on Facebook, she mentioned casually on Tuesday, like she'd just noticed the weather instead of obviously stalking my social media activity. Yep, you don't usually check in places. I don't usually go places worth checking into. That earned me a look that could have curdled milk, but I kept eating my cereal like we were discussing the sports scores instead of the slow-motion implosion of our marriage. By Thursday, she'd escalated to phase 3, showing up uninvited. I was in the middle of learning how to properly sauté garlic without burning it. Apparently, there's a whole science to this stuff. When Marco's assistant came over to my station looking apologetic and confused. Liam? There's a woman at the front desk who says she's your wife. She wants to come in and watch the class. I looked up from my pan to see Maya through the glass partition, wearing one of her most charming smiles and gesturing animatedly at the poor receptionist who was clearly trying to explain why random people couldn't just wander into an active cooking class. Tell her the class is closed to observers, I said, turning my attention back to the garlic. Insurance liability or something. Marco himself appeared at my elbow a few minutes later, looking bemused. Your wife seems very persistent. That's one word for it. She offered to pay the full tuition just to sit in the back and watch. I glanced over at Maya, who was now pacing back and forth in the lobby like a caged animal, checking her phone and occasionally looking in our direction with what I'm sure she thought was a winning smile. Marco, this is the first thing I've done for myself in 3 years that doesn't involve her approval or input. Could you please just not let her in? He nodded slowly, like he understood something about my situation that I hadn't actually explained. Of course, but maybe you should talk to her after class, yes? She seems upset. Upset was an understatement. When I finally emerged from the studio 2 hours later, Maya was sitting in her car in the parking lot like some kind of relationship stalker, engine running and face illuminated by her phone screen. Really, Liam? She said, rolling down her window as I approached my car. You couldn't even let me watch? I'm your wife. You're also the person who's blown off every plan we've made for the past 6 months. What exactly did you want to watch? Me learning to do something you've never shown any interest in. I showed interest. I offered to take the class with you. You offered to take over the class with me. There's a difference. She got out of her car then, and I could see she was genuinely upset, not performatively upset, but actually hurt and confused. It would have been easier if she'd been fake crying or trying to manipulate me. Real emotions were harder to dismiss. I don't understand what's happening here, she said quietly. We used to do everything together. No, Maya. You used to do everything you wanted, and I used to tag along or wait at home while you did it. That's not the same thing. That's not true. I pulled out my phone, opened my messages, and started scrolling backward through months of conversations. Let's see. August 15th. Can't make dinner tonight. Emergency at work. August 22nd. Rain check on the movie? Sarah's having a crisis. September 3rd. Sorry, forgot we had plans. Already committed to helping Mom. September. Stop. Her voice was small now, barely audible over the traffic noise from the street. But I kept going, reading dates and excuses and last-minute cancellations like I was presenting evidence in court. Because that's what they were. Evidence of a pattern she'd never acknowledged. Proof of how little our plans actually meant to her. October 1st. Can't do anniversary dinner. Chloe's engagement party. October 7th. Totally spaced on the concert. Can you sell the tickets? October 15th. I said stop. That's my birthday, by the way. Getting ready now. Can't wait. Followed by radio silence until you showed up the next morning with apology pastries. Maya was crying now, and not the pretty kind of crying that she did when she wanted sympathy. This was the ugly, mascara-running kind that meant she was actually processing what I was showing her. I never realized, she whispered. That's the problem, Maya. You never realize because keeping track of my feelings isn't important enough to remember. But I love you. I know you do. But you love your friends too, and your family, and your job, and your social life. The difference is, they get your attention when they need it. I get your leftover time, if there is any. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, smearing makeup across her cheek. So what are you saying? That this is over? I'm saying I'm not keeping score anymore, Maya. I'm keeping receipts. I gestured at my phone, still open to our message history with its endless scroll of broken promises and forgotten plans. And the receipts show that our relationship works exactly one way. Your way. You make plans with other people, and I adjust. You have emergencies, and I understand. You forget about me, and I forgive you. but it never goes the other direction. That's not. When's the last time you canceled plans with someone else because I needed you? When's the last time you told your friends you couldn't help them because you'd already committed to spending time with your husband? Silence. The kind of silence that answers questions you didn't really want to ask. I thought so, I said gently. So I'm done adjusting. I'm done understanding. I'm done forgiving my way into irrelevance. I started walking toward my car, then turned back. I'm not trying to punish you, Maya. I'm trying to save myself. There's a difference. She was still standing there when I drove away, looking lost and small in the parking lot lights. Part of me wanted to turn around, to comfort her, to slip back into the familiar pattern of making her feel better about hurting me. But a bigger part of me, the part that had spent 2 hours learning to cook something beautiful from scratch, knew that some lessons can't be taught. They have to be learned. The negotiation came on Sunday morning while I was making scrambled eggs that actually looked like food instead of yellow rubber, thanks to Marco's tips about low heat and constant stirring. Maya had been unusually quiet since our parking lot confrontation Friday night, which in Maya speak meant she was either plotting something or having one of those rare moments of self-reflection that happened about as often as solar eclipses. She wandered into the kitchen wearing my old college sweatshirt and that careful expression people get when they're about to propose a deal they think is fair, but probably isn't. I'd seen this look before, right before she'd suggested we compromise on our vacation plans by going somewhere that happened to be exactly where she wanted to go anyway. I've been thinking, she announced, settling onto one of our bar stools like she was about to deliver a presentation to the board of directors. About what you said Friday night. About the receipts and everything. I kept stirring my eggs and waited for whatever brilliant solution she'd concocted that would somehow make this whole situation my fault while making her look reasonable and accommodating. You're right, she continued, which immediately put me on high alert because Maya admitting she was wrong was like spotting a unicorn. Theoretically possible, but highly suspicious when it actually happened. I have been taking you for granted, and I want to fix that. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. If Fridays are your cooking nights now, then Saturdays are ours. Like really ours. No phones, no friends, no distractions. Just us, doing whatever we want to do together. I turned off the heat and actually looked at her, trying to read the subtext behind what sounded like a reasonable proposal. Maya rarely gave up anything without getting something bigger in return, and she definitely never admitted fault without having an angle. Every Saturday? I asked. Every Saturday. I'll even put it in my calendar so I don't forget. She pulled out her phone and started typing with the kind of theatrical enthusiasm that meant she was performing helpfulness rather than actually being helpful. There. Date night with Liam every Saturday from now until forever. What about your Saturday plans? Didn't you just commit to helping Jessica move this weekend? Her face flickered for just a second. The kind of micro-expression that meant I'd caught her in the middle of making promises she hadn't thought through. That's different. That's this weekend. I'm talking about starting next Saturday. Uh-huh. Besides, helping people move isn't fun. Spending time with my husband is fun. She said it with the kind of forced cheerfulness that made it sound like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. All right, I said, because honestly, I was curious to see how this would play out. Saturdays are ours. No phones, no friends, no emergencies that only you can solve. Exactly. See, we can totally make this work. I should have known better. I should have remembered that Maya's relationship with commitment was about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. But there was something almost endearing about her determination to fix things, even if her track record suggested she'd find a way to screw it up within approximately 36 hours. The first Saturday, she was hungover. Not regular hungover, mind you. Maya had apparently discovered some kind of new level of alcohol-induced misery that rendered her completely useless for anything more challenging than lying on the couch moaning about how bright the sunlight was and how loud my breathing sounded. I'm so sorry, babe. She mumbled into a pillow around 2 in the afternoon, still wearing the dress she'd worn to whatever Friday night adventure had left her looking like an extra from a zombie movie. I think I have food poisoning. Or maybe the flu. Definitely something medical and not at all related to the 3 bottles of wine I shared with the girls last night. Uh-huh. Rain check? We can do our Saturday thing next weekend instead. I looked at her, hair matted to one side of her head, makeup smeared across her cheek, smelling like a distillery that had been hit by a perfume truck. and felt exactly nothing. No anger, no disappointment, no surprise. Just the kind of resignation you feel when someone proves they're exactly who you thought they were. Sure, Maya. Feel better. Instead of wallowing in the predictability of it all, I called Jonas and went hiking. Spent 4 hours on the trails talking about everything except my marriage, breathing clean air and remembering what it felt like to be around someone who showed up when they said they would. The second Saturday, Maya went shopping with her sister. It's an emergency, she explained, already putting on her shoes while I was still drinking my morning coffee. Lauren's ex is getting married next month, and she needs a complete wardrobe overhaul, so she looks amazing at the wedding and makes him regret everything he's ever done. That sounds like a personal problem that Lauren should solve with a therapist instead of a credit card. Liam, she's my sister. I can't just abandon her when she needs me. But you can abandon your husband when he needs you. Maya paused with one shoe on and one shoe off, like she was caught between two different versions of herself and wasn't sure which one to choose. That's not the same thing. You're right. It's worse. Lauren's emergency is that she wants to look hot at her ex's wedding. My emergency is that my wife keeps breaking promises to spend time with me. I'm not breaking a promise. I'm postponing it. To next weekend? Yes, next weekend for sure. Lauren will be fine by then, and we can have our whole Saturday together. She looked so earnest, so convinced that this time would be different, that I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Okay, Maya. Have fun shopping. Instead of sitting around feeling sorry for myself, I went to see a movie by myself. Some indie film about a guy who learns to appreciate small moments after his wife leaves him. Pretty on the nose, but at least the popcorn was good. The third Saturday, she just forgot. I woke up to find her already gone, and a text message sent at 7:30 a.m. Brunch with the girls. Back later. Son. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement that we'd had plans. Just Maya living her best life while I sat in our apartment realizing that I'd been expecting different results from the same person who'd been disappointing me for years. That's when I stopped waiting for Maya to remember she was married and started remembering that I was allowed to have a life too. I called Priya, an old friend from college who'd been trying to get me to hang out for months. Hey, want to check out that new art gallery downtown? I hear they have a decent cafe. Finally, she said. I was starting to think you'd forgotten how to have fun without permission. Ouch, but fair. The gallery was actually pretty cool, local artists doing interesting things with mixed media and social commentary. Priya and I spent 3 hours wandering around, talking about art and books and whether the economy was actually as screwed as it seemed. Normal conversation between two adults who enjoyed each other's company. This is nice, Priya said as we shared a dessert at the cafe afterward. We should do this more often. Yeah, we should. What changed? Usually when I text you about hanging out, you say you need to check with Maya first. I thought about that for a minute, stirring my coffee and watching other people at other tables having conversations that didn't require anyone to check in with their significant other about whether they were allowed to exist in public. I guess I figured out that asking for permission to have friends is pretty fucked up. Priya raised her eyebrows. Everything okay at home? Define okay. She didn't push, which was one of the things I'd always liked about Priya. She was there when you needed to talk, but she didn't pry when you weren't ready. When I got home that evening, Maya was curled up on the couch watching Netflix like it was any other Saturday night. Hey babe, how was your day? She asked without looking away from her screen. Good. Went to an art gallery with Priya. Oh, that's nice. Was it boring? No, actually. It was really interesting. We should go together sometime. Totally. We should definitely do that. But she was already back to watching her show, and we both knew she'd never remember this conversation long enough to follow through on another empty promise. That's when I realized something important. Maya wasn't malicious. She wasn't trying to hurt me or sabotage our relationship. She was just fundamentally incapable of prioritizing anything that wasn't immediately in front of her face demanding attention. And I was finally done being the person who waited quietly in the background for her to notice I was there. Maya's Facebook post went live at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, which I know because my phone started buzzing like an angry wasp at exactly 11:48 p.m. with notifications from well-meaning friends who thought I should probably see what my wife was saying about me on the internet. Nothing says healthy marriage quite like your spouse airing your dirty laundry for 300 of your closest acquaintances to judge and dissect. The post itself was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive theater. When your husband cares more about pasta than his marriage, broken heart, hashtag confused, hashtag hurting right now, hashtag marriage assured. Attached was a photo she'd apparently taken through the window of Marco's cooking studio the previous Friday. A creepy stalker shot of me concentrating on my risotto while she lurked outside like some kind of relationship paparazzi. The fact that she'd driven there specifically to document my betrayal was both pathetic and mildly disturbing. But hey, at least she'd finally shown up somewhere I was supposed to be, even if it was to gather evidence for her social media pity party. The comments started rolling in immediately, because nothing brings out the amateur marriage counselors like a vague posting spouse looking for validation. Maya's friends descended on the post like vultures on roadkill, ready to tear apart a man they'd met maybe 3 times at various birthday parties and barbecues. Girl, you deserve so much better than this. Face blowing a kiss. What kind of man abandons his wife to play chef? Face with rolling eyes. Liam always seemed selfish to me, tbh. You're too good for him, Maya. Maybe it's time to lawyer up, honey. Get what's yours. Flex biceps. I lay in bed reading the comments on my phone while Maya pretended to be asleep next to me, occasionally shifting and sighing like she was having the most restless night of her life. She'd probably been refreshing the post every 5 minutes, watching the likes and angry face emojis accumulate like some kind of twisted popularity contest, where the prize was looking like the victim instead of the person who'd systematically ignored her husband for 3 years. By morning, the post had 63 comments and 47 shares, which apparently qualified as viral in Maya's social circle. Her phone was buzzing constantly with messages of support from friends who wanted to hear more about what a terrible husband I was and offers to take her out for drinks so she could properly trash talk me in person. I made coffee for 2 out of habit, then remembered Maya was probably too busy playing the wounded wife to appreciate basic human courtesy. She emerged from the bedroom around 8:30, already dressed and ready to milk her victim status for all it was worth. Sleep well? I asked, because I'm apparently a glutton for awkward conversations. Fine, she said without making eye contact, grabbing the coffee I'd made her and scrolling through her phone with the kind of satisfied expression people get when they've successfully manipulated a situation to their advantage. Interesting post last night. That got her attention. She looked up with those wide, innocent eyes that had probably worked really well on her parents when she was 7 and had broken something expensive. I was upset, she said simply, like that explained everything. I needed to talk to someone about what's happening with us. So you talked to Facebook instead of talking to me. I tried talking to you. You won't listen. Maya, you've never once asked me how I feel about our relationship. You've never asked why I started taking cooking classes, or what I need from you, or how we could fix things. You've just demanded that I go back to the way things were while you continue doing exactly what you've always done. She set down her coffee mug harder than necessary, the kind of dramatic gesture that meant she was gearing up for a fight she thought she could win. So now I'm not allowed to have feelings? I'm not allowed to reach out to my friends when my husband is being distant and weird. You're allowed to do whatever you want, Maya. You always have been. But you're not allowed to play the victim when the consequences of your choices finally catch up with you. What consequences? I missed a few dinners. It's not like I cheated on you or stole money or... You missed 3 years worth of dinners. You missed our anniversary, my birthday, every plan we ever made that conflicted with something you wanted to do instead. And now you're surprised that I've stopped making plans for you to blow off. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language, probably because this was the first time I'd ever laid out the pattern of our relationship in terms that couldn't be dismissed or minimized or explained away with emergency friend situations. That's not how it happened, isn't it? I pulled out my phone and opened our shared Google Calendar, the one that documented 3 years of our relationship in neat little color-coded blocks. Maya's events were in pink, dozens and dozens of them scattered across every week like confetti. My events were in blue, and they were mostly work meetings and dentist appointments, with the occasional date night entry that had been crossed out or moved or simply ignored. Here, I said, turning the screen toward her. Let's fact-check your Facebook post. She glanced at the calendar and immediately looked away, like staring at it too long might turn her to stone. Let's see. October. 22 events for you, 0 for us. September. 18 events for you, 0 for us. August. Stop. July, June, May. Maya, You've had over 200 social commitments in the past year. Want to guess how many times you've prioritized spending time with me? Silence. The kind of silence that happens when someone realizes their carefully constructed narrative is about to crumble under the weight of actual evidence. I'm going to show your Facebook friends something, I said, opening my own Facebook app for the first time in months. Since they seem so concerned about our marriage. Liam, don't. But I was already typing, screenshot of Maya's calendar attached. Interesting perspective from my wife about our relationship priorities. For context, here's her calendar from the past few months. Purple equals her social events. Blue equals time scheduled for us. Feel free to count them yourself and draw your own conclusions about who's prioritizing what. I hit post before I could talk myself out of it, then set my phone face down on the counter and went back to drinking my coffee like I hadn't just launched a nuclear weapon into Maya's carefully curated social media presence. You asshole, she whispered, staring at her phone as the notifications started coming in. You complete asshole. I'm not the one who decided to make our private relationship problems into public entertainment, Maya. I'm just providing some additional context for your audience. Her phone was buzzing constantly now as mutual friends started seeing both posts, and I could practically watch her realize that her victim narrative was falling apart in real time. The same people who'd been calling me selfish and terrible were now seeing the actual evidence of who'd been neglecting whom. Within an hour, the tide had completely turned. Comments started appearing on my post from people who'd apparently been watching our relationship dynamics for years and finally felt permission to say what they really thought. Holy shit, Maya has had time for literally everything except her husband. This explains so much about why Liam always seemed stressed at parties. Girl, maybe the problem isn't the cooking classes. Wait, she missed his birthday dinner for karaoke? Damn. Maya watched her support system evaporate in real time, her face getting redder with each comment that sided with me instead of automatically assuming she was the victim. The same friends who'd been ready to lynch me 12 hours earlier were now questioning whether maybe, just maybe, Maya wasn't the innocent party in this situation. By noon, she'd deleted her original post, but the damage was done. Screenshots lived forever, and our mutual friends had finally seen the receipts I'd been collecting for 3 years. I hope you're happy, she said, shoving her phone into her purse and heading for the door. You just humiliated me in front of everyone we know. No, Maya, I just told the truth. If that's humiliating, maybe the problem isn't the truth. She slammed the door on her way out, probably off to find some friend who hadn't seen the calendar screenshot yet and would still be willing to tell her she was right and I was wrong. But for the first time in our entire relationship, the court of public opinion was on my side, and Maya was going to have to face the fact that her version of events didn't match reality. Sometimes the truth really is the best revenge. The dinner party happened on a Saturday night 3 weeks after the Facebook incident, and honestly, I hadn't planned it as some kind of power move. It just sort of evolved naturally from the fact that I'd learned to cook actual food and had friends who appreciated not having to split the check at overpriced restaurants every time we wanted to hang out. I'd invited 6 people, Jonas and his girlfriend Emma, Priya and her new boyfriend Marcus, plus Dave and Sarah from cooking class who'd become surprisingly good friends over our shared journey from culinary disasters to semi-competent home cooks. Nothing fancy. Just homemade pasta with 3 different sauces, a decent salad, and some wine that didn't come from a box with a plastic spigot. Maya wasn't invited, which sounds harsh when you put it like that, but honestly, when's the last time she'd shown up to something I'd planned anyway? Plus, these were my friends. People I'd started spending time with during all those Friday and Saturday nights when my wife was busy being the social butterfly of everyone else's life but mine. The cooking part was actually fun. I'd gotten pretty good at the whole multitasking thing Marco had taught us, keeping 3 pans going while timing everything so the pasta finished right when the sauce was ready and the bread came out of the oven still warm. There's something incredibly satisfying about creating something from scratch and having it actually turn out the way you intended. Jonas arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing that grin he got when he was proud of me for doing something that didn't involve apologizing to Maya for existing. Dude. This place smells amazing, he said, looking around our apartment like he was seeing it for the first time. Which, in a way, he was. The first time it had felt like my space instead of just the place where I waited for Maya to come home and tell me about her day. Thanks. I may have gone a little overboard with the garlic, but Marco says there's no such thing as too much garlic if you're doing it right. The others showed up within 15 minutes of each other, and soon we had that perfect dinner party energy where everyone's talking and laughing, and the wine is flowing just enough to make everything seem a little funnier and more profound than it probably actually is. Dave regaled us with stories about his attempts to recreate Marco's recipes for his wife, who apparently had very strong opinions about the correct way to fold tortellini. Sarah talked about her disastrous attempt at making homemade pizza dough that had somehow achieved the consistency of rubber cement. Priya and Marcus debated whether the food scene in our city was actually getting better or just getting more expensive. It was normal, adult, fun in a way that didn't require anyone to be the center of attention or create drama to keep things interesting. Around 9:30, right when we were debating whether anyone had room for the tiramisu I'd attempted to make, there was a knock at the door. Not Maya's usual tap tap tap, but a real knock, tentative and uncertain. I opened it to find my wife sitting on the floor in the hallway, leaning against the wall like she'd been there for a while. She wasn't dressed for a night out, just jeans and one of my old sweaters. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that looked genuinely messy instead of carefully arranged to look messy. "Maya, what are you doing out here?" "I didn't know if I should knock," she said quietly, not looking up at me. I could hear you guys laughing and I didn't want to interrupt. There was something different about her voice. Smaller somehow, like she'd run out of the energy it took to perform being Maya and was just sitting there being a person who felt lost and sad. "How long have you been out here?" "I don't know. A while." She finally looked up at me, and I could see she'd been crying. Not the pretty, single-tear kind of crying she did when she wanted sympathy, but the ugly, exhausted kind that meant something had actually broken inside her. From the dining room, I could hear my friends continuing their conversation, the comfortable buzz of people who enjoyed each other's company and didn't need to work at having a good time. "Do you want to come in?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted her to say yes. "I don't think they'd want me there. They're not angry with you, Maya. They just don't really know you. Because I've never been here when they're here." That hit differently than I'd expected. Not accusatory or defensive, just factual, like she was finally seeing something that had been obvious to everyone else for years. I sat down in the hallway next to her, leaving the door open so my friends wouldn't think I'd just vanished into thin air. "Fridays feel empty without you," she said after a minute, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. "Fridays were already empty, Maya. I was just the only one who noticed." She nodded slowly, like she was trying to process something that didn't quite fit with her understanding of how the world worked. "I keep going out with the girls, and it's fun, but then I come home, and you're not waiting for me anymore. You're not asking about my day, or wanting to hear about the drama, or you're just not there. I'm literally here every night. No, you're here, but you're not waiting for me. You're just living your life, and I'm not part of it anymore." I thought about that for a minute, watching her pick at a loose thread on her jeans like it was the most important thing in the world. "You were lonely even when we were together," she whispered, and for the first time since I'd known her, Maya seemed to understand something about our relationship that went deeper than her own immediate experience. That stopped me cold, because she was right. I had been lonely, desperately lonely, sitting across from her at restaurants while she checked her phone, lying next to her in bed while she scrolled through social media, making conversation that bounced off her like rain on a windshield. "Yeah," I said finally. I was. I never realized that was possible. Being lonely when you're with someone. It's the worst kind of lonely, actually, because you can't even complain about it without sounding crazy. She was crying again, but quietly, like she didn't want my friends to hear and think she was performing grief instead of actually feeling it. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. "I don't even know what I did wrong, exactly. I just know that you used to light up when I walked in the room, and now you just don't." From inside the apartment, I could hear someone, probably Priya, telling a story that was making everyone laugh. The sound of people enjoying themselves, being present with each other, choosing to be there instead of wishing they were somewhere else. "I used to think if I just tried harder, if I just understood what you needed, if I just forgave you one more time, eventually you'd realize that I mattered too," I said. "But you can't make someone care about you, Maya. You can't love someone into loving you back the same way." "But I do love you." "I know. But you love everyone, Maya. You love your friends and your family and your coworkers and random people you meet at parties." I needed to be loved differently. I needed to be chosen. She looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was seeing something she'd been blind to for 3 years. And I never chose you. Not when it mattered. Not when it was hard. Not when choosing me meant disappointing someone else. We sat there in the hallway for a few more minutes, listening to the sounds of a dinner party happening without us. Laughter and conversation and the comfortable chaos of people who genuinely enjoyed being together. Finally, Maya stood up, wiping her face with the sleeve of my sweater. I should go, she said. Let you get back to your friends. Maya, no, it's okay. This is good. This is what you should have. People who actually show up. She started walking toward the elevator, then turned back. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. For learning to cook, for making friends, for not waiting for me anymore. The elevator doors closed before I could figure out what to say to that, leaving me sitting alone in the hallway trying to process the first real conversation Maya and I had had in years. When I went back inside, my friends had tactfully pretended not to notice that I'd been gone, though Priya squeezed my shoulder when I sat back down. Everything okay? She asked quietly. Yeah, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. Everything's okay. And for the first time in a long time, it actually was. Maya's grand gesture arrived via text message at exactly 7:42 a.m. on a Thursday morning, delivered with the kind of desperate enthusiasm that told me she'd probably been awake all night, crafting what she thought would be the perfect solution to our imploding marriage. The screenshot showed her phone's calendar app with Friday nights blocked out in bright red letters. Date night with Liam. Do not move or cancel. Seriously, Maya, don't screw this up. She'd even added little heart emojis around the edges, like digital decoration would somehow make the gesture more meaningful instead of highlighting how calculated the whole thing was. Look, she said when she found me in the kitchen an hour later, waving her phone around like she'd just discovered the cure for relationship cancer. I scheduled us. Every Friday night from now until forever. See, I'm changing. I looked at the screenshot while sipping my coffee, noting that she'd managed to block out exactly 2 hours. 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., which was probably the minimum amount of time she thought she could get away with while still claiming to have made an effort. That's great, Maya, isn't it? And look, I even set multiple alarms so I won't forget. One at noon on Friday, one at 5, one at 6:30. There's literally no way I can miss these anymore. She was bouncing on her toes with that manic energy people get when they think they've found a shortcut that will solve all their problems without actually requiring them to examine why the problems existed in the first place. Very thorough, I said, because what else do you say when someone thinks scheduling basic human decency is an achievement worthy of celebration? So what do you want to do for our first official scheduled date night? We could go to that new sushi place downtown, or maybe see a movie, or Maya. She stopped mid-bounce, probably picking up on something in my voice that suggested her brilliant solution wasn't having the desired effect. You always had space for brunches, I said quietly, and girls' nights, and shopping trips with your sister, and emergency friend situations, and work events, and birthday parties for people you barely know. Her face started to fall as she realized where this was going. You never had to schedule time for any of that stuff because you wanted to do it. You just did it. Immediately. Enthusiastically, without needing calendar reminders or multiple alarms or motivational self-talk. But this is different. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're treating time with your husband like a dental appointment. Something unpleasant but necessary that you need to trick yourself into remembering. The bouncing stopped entirely. Maya sat down across from me with that expression people get when they realize their perfectly reasonable solution has somehow made things worse instead of better. I'm trying, Liam. I'm really trying. I know you are. But trying to force yourself to want to spend time with me isn't the same as actually wanting to spend time with me. But I do want to spend time with you. Do you? Or do you want to spend time with me because that's what good wives are supposed to do? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it, probably because we both knew the truth was more complicated than she wanted to admit. I don't understand what you want from me, she said finally. I'm literally scheduling time for us. I'm making you a priority. Isn't that what you've been asking for? Maya, you've had 237 social events in the past year. I counted them. Parties, dinners, girls' nights, shopping trips, brunches, work happy hours, family gatherings, random Tuesday afternoon coffee dates with people you haven't seen since college. I pulled out my phone and showed her the spreadsheet I'd made during a particularly masochistic moment the week before, color-coded by type of event and frequency of cancellation. You've never once needed to schedule time for any of those things. They just happen naturally because you wanted them to happen. But spending time with me requires calendar blocking and alarm reminders and what appears to be a significant amount of mental preparation. She stared at the spreadsheet like it was written in a foreign language, probably trying to figure out how her social life looked so different when laid out in neat rows and columns instead of just being a fun, spontaneous series of adventures. That's different, she said weakly. Those are social obligations. No, Maya. Those are choices. Every single one of them was a choice you made because you wanted to make it. And every single time you chose them over me, that was also a choice. But I love you more than I love them. Maybe. But you don't prioritize me more than you prioritize them. And after 3 years, I'm starting to think love without prioritization is just a nice feeling that doesn't actually mean anything. She was crying now, but quietly, like she was finally understanding something that had been obvious to everyone else for years. So what do I do? How do I fix this? I don't know if you can. That hit her like a physical blow. She actually recoiled, like I'd reached across the table and slapped her. What do you mean? I mean, maybe this is just who you are, Maya. Maybe you're someone who gets excited about everyone else's life, but finds her husband's life boring and optional. Maybe that's not something you can fix with calendar reminders. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? When's the last time you suggested we do something together that wasn't in response to me complaining about you never wanting to do anything together? Silence. The kind of silence that answers questions you don't want to ask. I want Fridays back, she whispered. I know you do. Can't we try? Can't we see if the scheduling thing works? I looked at her sitting there with her phone in her hands, digital evidence of her attempt to program herself into being a better wife, and felt something that might have been pity if it wasn't so exhausting. Maya, you've been married to me for 3 years. If you needed calendar reminders to remember that I exist, what does that tell you about how you actually feel about being married to me? It tells me that I'm disorganized and scattered and bad at managing my time. Not that I don't love you. But those are the same thing, don't you see? When something matters to you, you don't need to manage your time around it. You just make time for it naturally because you want to. She was scrolling through her phone now, probably looking at all those automatically generated date night with Liam entries stretching into the future like a prison sentence she'd imposed on herself. I can change, she said desperately. I can learn to prioritize better. I can be the wife you need me to be. But I don't want you to have to learn to prioritize me, Maya. I want to be married to someone who prioritizes me naturally, without thinking about it, because that's how they feel about me. That's not fair. People can change. People can grow. Sure they can. But they can't change what excites them. They can't grow into feeling differently about what matters to them. You can force yourself to show up to our scheduled date nights, but you can't force yourself to be excited about them. She deleted one of the date night entries while I watched, then immediately restored it, like she couldn't decide whether to double down on her solution or admit it wasn't going to work. Consistency, I said gently. That's all that matters now. What do you mean? I mean, if you want any chance of saving this marriage, you need to prove that I matter to you through your actions, not your calendar entries. You need to show up consistently, enthusiastically, without reminders or alarms or having to talk yourself into it. For how long? I don't know. Maybe forever. Maybe until I trust that when you say you'll be somewhere, you'll actually be there because you want to be there, not because your phone reminded you to be there. Maya stared at her calendar for a long moment, probably calculating the odds of successfully pretending to be excited about scheduled husband time for an indefinite period. And if I can't, she asked quietly, then at least we'll both know we tried everything. But as I watched her struggle with the weight of actually having to choose me consistently over everything else that competed for her attention, I was starting to suspect that some lessons come too late to matter. The final cooking class arrived faster than I'd expected, like good things always do when you're actually enjoying them instead of just enduring them until something better comes along. 12 weeks had somehow compressed into what felt like 12 days. And suddenly Marco was announcing that tonight we'd each be preparing a complete meal from scratch. Our culinary graduation, so to speak. I'd invited Jonas and Priya, partly because they'd been the most supportive during my journey from married doormat to functional human being, and partly because I wanted witnesses to the fact that I could now create something beautiful and delicious without needing anyone's permission or approval. Maya wasn't invited, which probably sounds petty, but honestly, when had she ever shown up to anything that mattered to me anyway? The menu I'd planned was ambitious, but not insane. Homemade pappardelle with a slow-cooked ragu that had been simmering since morning, roasted vegetables with herbs I'd grown myself on our apartment's tiny balcony, and a panna cotta that had taken me 3 attempts to get right, but now looked like something you'd find in an actual restaurant. "Looking good, Liam," Marco said, stopping by my station as I rolled out pasta dough with the kind of confidence I never thought I'd possess. "Your knife work has improved tremendously. And that ragu," he kissed his fingertips dramatically. "Perfetto." It was weird how much his approval meant to me. Not because Marco was some celebrity chef or because his opinion would make or break my culinary career, but because he was someone who'd watched me grow from a guy who could barely boil water without burning it to someone who could actually create something worth eating. He'd seen the work I'd put in, the frustration when things went wrong, the satisfaction when they went right. "Thanks, Marco. This has been..." I paused, trying to find words that didn't sound like a Hallmark card. "This has been exactly what I needed." He nodded knowingly, the way people do when they understand something without you having to explain it. "Sometimes we must learn to feed ourselves before we can feed others, yes?" Yeah, that was exactly it. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Proud of you. Maybe we can start fresh." I looked at the message for a long moment, then slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding. Tonight was about finishing something I'd started, not about managing Maya's feelings about my newfound independence. Jonas and Priya arrived right on time, which shouldn't have been noteworthy except that I'd gotten so used to people being late or canceling or just not showing up that punctuality felt like a minor miracle. "Holy shit, Liam," Jonas said, looking around Marco's studio like he'd entered a parallel universe where his best friend was actually competent at something domestic. "This is legit." "Language, please," Marco called from across the room, but he was smiling. "We are artists here, not construction workers." The next 2 hours flew by in a blur of controlled chaos. 12 students working at their stations, the air thick with the smell of garlic and herbs and simmering sauces, everyone focused on their individual masterpieces while somehow being part of something larger. It reminded me of the dinner parties I'd started hosting, that sense of people choosing to be present instead of just physically occupying space. My pappardelle came together perfectly, silky ribbons of pasta that had exactly the right bite, tossed with ragu that had developed layers of flavor I didn't even know were possible when I'd started this journey 12 weeks ago. The vegetables were caramelized and tender, the panna cotta had set properly, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely proud of something I'd accomplished. "This is restaurant quality," Priya said after her first bite, and I could tell she wasn't just being polite. "When did you become an actual chef?" "I'm not a chef," I said, but I was grinning like an idiot. "I'm just a guy who learned that he could do something well if he stuck with it long enough." Jonas raised his wine glass. "To Liam, who finally figured out that he's worth showing up for." We clinked glasses, and I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't realized had been unsettled. Not happiness exactly, but something steadier and more reliable. Contentment, maybe. The knowledge that I could create good things in my life without needing anyone else's participation or approval. The text from Maya came again around 10:30. After we'd finished eating and I was helping clean up. "Can we talk? I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try." This time I did respond. "Tomorrow." But not about getting back together. About moving forward separately. Her reply was immediate. "I understand." And maybe she did. Maybe sitting in that hallway listening to my dinner party had taught her something about what she'd lost, about what it felt like to be on the outside of someone else's life instead of always being the center of your own. Over the next few months, Maya did try. She showed up to a dinner I cooked, arriving early and staying late, actually putting her phone away and listening when I talked about work or books or random thoughts that popped into my head. She remembered things I told her and brought them up later in conversation. She even suggested activities we could do together, hiking, museums, farmers markets, like she was finally learning to see me as a person whose company she might actually enjoy. For a while, I gave her chances. We had some good evenings, some conversations that felt like the kind of thing I'd always hoped we could have. She kept most of her scheduled date nights, only canceling twice in 2 months, which was probably a personal record. But something fundamental had shifted in me during those 12 weeks of Friday nights at Marco's studio. I'd learned that I could be happy without constantly managing someone else's happiness. I discovered what it felt like to be around people who showed up consistently, who didn't need to be reminded that I mattered, who actually seemed to enjoy my company instead of just tolerating it. Maya was trying to become the person I'd needed her to be 3 years ago, but I was no longer the person who needed that kind of trying. The conversation where I told her I wanted a divorce was surprisingly calm. We were sitting in our kitchen, my kitchen, really, since I'd been the one making it feel like home, and she was telling me about her day at work, actually listening when I responded with questions and observations instead of just waiting for her turn to talk again. "You're different," she said after a pause. "More yourself, I guess." "Yeah, I think I am. I like this version of you better. I like this version of me better too. But I had to become this version without you, Maya. And I think I need to stay this way without you." She nodded slowly, like she'd been expecting this conversation even if she'd been hoping to avoid it. "Because I waited too long to change. Because you shouldn't have had to change at all. You should have wanted to prioritize me from the beginning, not because I finally got tired of being forgotten. But I do want to prioritize you now. I know, but I don't want to be married to someone who has to work that hard to remember I exist." We talked for another hour about logistics and lawyers and how to split up a life we'd built together, and it was probably the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Maya cried a little, but not the dramatic kind of crying she used to do when she wanted me to fix things for her. This was sadder and more real, the grief of recognizing that some mistakes can't be unmade. Some lessons come too late to save what they were supposed to save. 6 months later, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment across town, hosting dinner parties every other Friday for friends who showed up when they said they would. Maya was dating someone new, a guy who apparently thought her spontaneity was charming instead of exhausting, who didn't mind being Plan B as long as he got to be on the list at all. And me? I kept cooking, not because I had to prove anything to anyone anymore, but because I'd learned that the most important person to show up for was myself, that my time mattered, that my feelings mattered, that I was worth more than leftover attention and scheduled affection. The truth was simple, and it had taken me 33 years and a failed marriage to learn it. I wasn't teaching Maya a lesson about how to be a better wife. I was teaching myself a lesson about how to be a better man. The kind of man who knew his own worth and didn't apologize for expecting others to recognize it too. The kind of man who made reservations for one and enjoyed every bite.